Well, a very good morning everyone from the William Guild building. I'm going to give you some feedback, or feed forward as I like to call it, on your PSE report. Of course, I'm not putting this on YouTube because I want my face to be on YouTube. I don't think I'll ever be famous, and I don't mind. This feed forward is for you to use so you can improve for next year. So please do use it. So first, let me talk about what went well. I enjoyed reading your reports. I was sitting in my garden, went through all the 60 of my class, and I think that gave me just a little bit of a tan. It was a pleasant experience, and there were lots of things that went really well. All of you showed a good understanding of the picture superiority effect and what the effect actually is, and also the theories that have been brought forward to explain it. For example, dual coding. You also showed that you knew what that was about. Also, either in your introduction or in the discussion, you showed that you understood how you could probably use the PSE in real life applications. For example, in advertising or in even medical applications. Some of you even came up with some good suggestions for how you could improve lectures. And it's one of the reasons I often use pictures in my lectures, because actually not even because I knew about the PSE, but because I had an intuition that might help. And some of you picked up on that, so that was really good. And also you gave a really good description of how the experiment was run. Probably because you all did that straight after you actually ran the experiment. So that's really the best time to write your method section. But of course, as always, there are things that can be improved. In the introduction, I'm just going through this in a sort of chronological style, from introduction to discussion. So in the introduction, what often seemed to be the case, not for everybody, but this is the general pattern, that the hypotheses and the description of the study seem to come out of the blue a little bit. But what you need to do in your introduction, that's the convincing bit. You need to convince the reader that your study is worthwhile doing. And there can be several reasons. For example, maybe the field has given really inconclusive, inconsistent results, and you need to do a replication, which is probably the case for us. Because a lot has been done, you don't know how much of what's ever been done never got published. So you don't know. So let's do this replication. Let's see whether it is a reliable finding. Or, maybe some people says the PSE is a really strong effect. So you can see, well, you can test, does it occur with a really small group? If the effect is really strong, then it should be found with a small group of participants. Some of you actually picked that up, which was really good. In the method section, under the participant heading, all of you, majority of you, wrote the correct information there, so that was good, but it could be written more concisely. So if you have a look at a published article, this one comes from one of the articles I wrote, a lot of things can be crammed into one sentence. So 28 undergraduate students, 21 females, mean of 20.4 and standard deviation of 1.5, blah blah blah, took part. You don't have to have a sentence saying there were 21 females and 7 males, and the mean was and the standard deviation was. You can put that all in brackets right after the word students. Of course, you weren't sort of marked down because you didn't write that concisely. It was the first time you did that. But for next time, just know that it can be just written in one sentence, just like this. I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again, that independent variables need a name. They really do. They get terribly upset if you don't give them a name. I'm serious. So, the independent variable was not whether the stimuli were pictures or words. The independent variable has a name. The independent variable was stimulus type with two conditions, pictures and words. So that's the way to write it. Please bear that in mind for next year. I know some of the debrief sheets that you might have come across when you did the SONA studies, they wrote it wrong, but let's change that. Let's make that better. Nice one here for you. Data are versus data is. That is good. That is bad, because data are plural. Dependent versus dependent. E versus A. That is good. That is bad. Now, you may wonder, because I've pointed these things out before, why do these probably quite minor things, why do they matter? Well, there is a reason. And I'd like you to think about a job interview situation. Just imagine, candidate walks in, fantastic CV, looks fantastic, until you look at the bottom of the shoes and you find that the newly bought shoes still have the price tag on them. Now obviously, whether or not you've got a price tag on your shoe doesn't affect in any way your ability to do the job properly. Doesn't affect your intelligence. But to the interviewer who notices that, it does give out the message that this person hasn't taken the time to properly check everything through. It does say something about conscientiousness, perhaps. So the same thing happens when a marker reads the word dependent with an A, or data is, or an independent variable without a name. It's not wrong, and you can still show your understanding, but it does give this impression that you haven't paid attention to detail. So if you know of yourself that you mix these things up, then just let it be read by somebody else and let them tell you, how you could change that, because it really does matter. If not now, then even more so when you actually do write a job application letter. The APA style graph, very important, and even more important because this graph was actually given to you in the class slides. And we went through this. What should be on there? What characteristics should it have? So it's not the line graph in this case. We should have had a bar graph, but the principles are the same. So many of you actually got marks taken off because things were missing. For example, the title was missing, or it didn't say what the error bars stood for, or the figure title was above, or you called it a graph or a table. It really has to be specific because of the APA convention. So please do that next time. It's a very easy thing to get right. The t-test caused a little bit of confusion for some, so I'll just I made it explicit here what each thing stands for. So you've got a little sentence, you've got that standard phrase, and within that standard phrase there's this bit about t equals something, comma, p equals something. So just have a look at this. So you got your t value, and in brackets the degrees of freedom. Now that t value you've calculated has a particular value. And then the next part, the P, the probabilities. It's the probability that this t value has happened purely by chance, in this case, is larger than, so the pointy bit going to the right, is larger than 0.05, the risk level that psychologists are willing to take. In the bottom scenario, the t that you've observed with this degree of freedom equals quite a bit more, 2.87. So the probability that this t value has happened purely on the basis of chance is smaller than the risk level that we're willing to take. So when it is smaller, then we say, it won't just happen by, it won't have happened by chance alone. There's probably something genuine going on. So in the first case, we have in the second case we have a significant effect, and in the top case we have a non-significant effect. Also bear in mind, it's not insignificant, but it's non-significant. Insignificant means that it's meaningless, which it is not. A non-significant effect is not meaningless. It just means that you haven't shown a difference between your two conditions. Where things went wrong was often this sign, the larger than, smaller than. And I couldn't work out whether it was because you didn't understand what the sign meant, or whether you didn't understand whether it was smaller or larger than. So I've pointed that out whenever that was the case. I hope that makes it a little bit clearer. If not, please ask. I'm always happy to talk about p-values. Something else that came up a few times, enough for me to mention it here, because the majority of the studies did not show a significant effect. And some of you said the difference between conditions was not significant, but the data did support the hypothesis. You can't say that. You've got to go by the outcome of the statistical test. If that says there is no significant difference, then that's the end of it. You can say there's a trend, it goes in the right direction, but you can't say that you support the hypothesis. Something else that could be improved was in the discussion section, and that is the main thing to focus on. Next year the discussion section will be probably weighing the heaviest of all things, and that will increase as the years go by, until when you're doing your thesis, the marker will read, or your supervisor will read the introduction, they'll give you comments, they'll read the method, give you comments, they'll read the results section and give you comments, so you can improve them for the final bit. But they'll not read your discussion until it's marking time. So that really is your own contribution to your thesis. So now is a good time to start improving the way you write them. And there were many good things, but certain things that need to be addressed. So when you've got your findings, and then in a discussion you need to explain them. And as I said, the majority of the studies that we did not find a picture superiority effect. So why is that? Why did we find that? And, very important, take your explanation all the way, really fully develop it. And in class we talked about several possible explanations for why you didn't find a PSE, but not all those explanations apply to each study, so be very careful. And I've put here several options of possible things that you could find. So some of you might have had this kind of result. Pictures slightly better than words, but no significant difference. So it goes in the right direction. That's positive. How could you explain the fact that you haven't found a significant effect in this instance? Well, what could be causing it could be not enough participants. But don't stop there. many of you stopped there. You should not. You need to explain that fully. So what you need to do is look at some other studies. What did they test? What did they find? So for example, XYZ, they had the same mean difference as us between the two conditions, but their effect was significant. Now, they tested 30 participants and we only had 10. So the non-significance of our effect is likely due to a small sample size. So that's what you need to say. A second option could be that your pictures and words conditions actually gave very similar results. So you can't really say it goes in the right direction. It doesn't really go anywhere. How could you explain the null effect in this case? Well, can you still say not enough participants? No, you cannot, because even with more participants, why should it go either way? There's no way to suggest which way it's going to go. So what's more likely is that that 1 second that you presented the stimuli for was not enough to encode the pictures, but it might have been enough to encode the words. So word encoding was good, but the picture encoding was not as good as it could be, thereby eliminating the PSE. So you need to say, how did this particular manipulation, this is 1 second, how did that affect pictures in a different way than it affected words? So that would have eliminated the effect. Option 3, which happened in some cases, that words were recalled better than pictures. How do we explain that? Well, in some of those cases it actually was a significant effect. So words were significantly better recalled than pictures. So if that's the case, can you then still say that that the problem is not having enough participants? No, because having more participants would not make it go like that. It would probably make it worse. So there must be something else. And there are several things that could be the cause. So it could be the same as for the second option, where 1 second was not enough to encode the pictures, but it wasn't enough for words. So not just was the PSE eliminated, but it was even reversed. So you could say that, or you could say that participants all knew what the hypothesis was, so perhaps when learning the words they tried harder, so reversing the effect. Now there are other possible causes, as some of you mentioned, for why we did not find PSE. But not all of them are good. We talked about noise in class. How could noise affect your memory? Can that cause the elimination of the effect? No, I don't think so. Why should it reduce the memorability of pictures and not the memorability of words? Should it not just affect overall recall? So without noise you might be there, and with noise you might be there, but that difference is still there. Some of you mentioned quite a limited age range. You're all with 1 participant accepted, between sort of 18 and then 22, thereabouts. Could that have caused the reduction in PSE? Possibly, but only if you can actually show that there are some other studies that have found it only in elderly people. I think it was one study that did show some effect to that extent, but you have to support that argument. Was the filter task too hard? Was the filter task too easy? How could that affect whether or not you're going to find a picture superiority effect? It could be a cause, but you have to show how that would affect pictures and not words. You can't just say it was too easy, full stop. so they could have rehearsed the stimuli. Yeah, but they could have rehearsed the pictures and they could have rehearsed the words. So why would that reduce the effect? So you need to explain everything you mention. Explain, explain, explain why you think it would eliminate the picture superiority effect. Suggestions for further research sadly were missing from most reports. You critiqued your own work and said how you should improve it, but then didn't say how you could build on that experiment once you have improved it. And those of you who did include suggestions for further research often didn't develop them thoroughly enough, which is something you have to do. These are just a few things that I've come up with from the top of my head. So you might want to test the effect of knowing the hypothesis. So there were all of the participants, they knew the hypothesis. What sort of strategies do they employ that would be different from naive participants? You probably need something more than just an experimental method. You might need something qualitative in addition to find out more. But you need to develop that. So how would you test that? And what do you think you would find? Or some of you already wanted to include moving pictures in the presentations earlier on in the semester. And I said, no, please use still images, but keep those moving images ideas for the discussion. So you could do that. Say, how would it differ if I use, so pictures are go better than words, but what if I have moving pictures? Would that give me an even better memory? And why would that be? Are there any studies that suggest that? Or you could test whether the actual nature of the filler task, whether that's a mathematical task, a word-based task, a picture-based task, whether that would interfere with people's ability to recall either pictures or words. Mathematics probably doesn't interfere with either words or pictures, but if you had a picture task, that might interfere with their ability to recall the pictures. Now that is interesting if that was the case, because that's what actually happens when you see TV adverts. You don't just get one advert, you get lots of adverts, and they're all one after the other, and then there's a television program in the middle. How does that affect the extent to which we recall those pictures? So all those things you could mention and elaborate, so develop them, write more details about each suggestion. So the best thing you can do from now on, I know you've got exams, but then you've got this long summer. First thing to do is keep the feedback that we've given you on your report. Don't just put it aside, say that's the mark I got and that's it. Keep it somewhere safe and look at it again. Try to make sense of it. And in the summer you might have other things, you might try and earn some money as well, but just identify maybe 3 or 4 articles about a topic that you're interested in, scientific articles, and read them and see, does it make sense to you, do you understand it, and try to, so almost by osmosis, get familiar with the terminology, the way things are written, the particular turns of phrases. Reading articles is one of the best ways to improve your report writing, because your report is essentially an article. That's what they're all based on. So do that, and even if while I'm saying this you think, oh, I'm not going to do that, then you definitely need to do that. Even if it's just a handful, but commit yourself to that. It's a really good strategy. Next year you're going to have to write 3 reports. So before that, before you start writing, just watch this video again, just to familiarize yourself with the common things that people tend to not get quite right, and then start writing it. Now once you've finished the first draft, watch it again, read your own feedback again to this report, and see, have you actually done it properly, or are there things you still need to improve? I think that's the best way to improve, the way to success. If there's ever anything that you're not sure about, I'm here most of the summer. I only ever take long weekends, going into the cairngorms, hiking, but I'm usually here on Mondays and Tuesdays. So please do come back if you have any questions about anything psychology related. And I wish you well in your exams. I really hope it goes well. I shall be thinking about you and sort of sending you my good vibes from a distance. And I'll see you back after the summer.